Interceptor, 2022, Summary. The U.S. nuclear missile interceptor base located at Fort Greely in Alaska is under siege by a group of its own members, who take drastic measures by destroying communication equipment to prevent any calls for help, executing fellow soldiers, and dismantling the interceptor missile controls. Fort Greely had been overrun. It takes 24 minutes for a nuclear missile launched in Russia to strike its target in the U.S. In the event of a nuclear launch, U.S. forces would have half that time, 12 minutes, to destroy any incoming missiles in flight. On a chopper in the Pacific Ocean, 1,500 miles of northwest Hawaii, Captain Joanna Julia J.J. Collins is on her way to the SBX-1 nuclear missile interceptor platform, to which she has been reluctantly reassigned to serve as the facility's missile system specialist. Upon being dropped off, Captain Collins is met by Ensign Washington, and welcomes Collins to SBX-1. Ensign Washington escorts Captain Collins to the office of Lieutenant Colonel Clark Marshall, who expresses his pleasure at seeing her once more. Marshall attempts to comfort the troubled Collins, explaining that he did everything within his power to assist her, but the assignment to SBX-1 was the best option available. He assures her that he believed her account of a prior incident from the very beginning. As Washington shows Collins to her new quarters, she reveals that she and many other women admire Collins for her actions, noting that similar experiences have affected many of them. However, this acknowledgement offers little solace to Collins, who soon discovers a provocative photograph of herself with the phrase bounty hunt affixed to her mirror. Collins turns to a good luck card from her father, Frank Collins, for comfort. Suddenly, Marshall arrives at her quarters and urges her to join him in the command center, with her sidearm. On their way to the command center, Marshall alerts Collins to an active shooter scenario at Fort Greely, instigated by their own team. The situation regarding their interceptors is unclear, as there has been no response to communications from them. Once at the command center, Collins takes her post as Corporal Rahul Shah, who joined the team 6 months ago, reports that Fort Greely is not being jammed, but rather that their communications seem to be shut off. Marshall requests an update from Corporal Beaver Baker regarding the Russian attack submarine that has been operating in the vicinity of SBX-1 for months. Baker informs Marshall that it is still positioned nearby. Believing this to merely be an exercise, Baker begins aggravating Collins until Shaw reports that SBX-1 is being assigned primary early warning status, and Marshall reminds everyone that this means that they are now the lone nuclear missile defense for the United States. Collins then picks up NSA radio chatter about a Russian ICBM missile base in Tavlinka, Russia having been attacked and 16 of their Topol-M mobile missiles taken, before Marshall receives a call from the Pentagon directing them to a video of a Russian terrorist confirming the missiles' theft and their intent to fire them on 16 American cities. Marshall takes Collins aside and tells her that they are the only thing standing between America and Armageddon. Marshall moves to find Captain Lou Welsh to secure the HVAR codes. Collins comes to an important conclusion and decides to pursue Marshall, expressing her suspicion that, given the internal nature of the incidents at Greely and Tavlinka, there could also be infiltrators within SBX-1. As she finishes speaking, Collins notices some of the janitors nearby and locks eyes with one of them, who orders to the others to go. One shoots and kills Marshall, though Collins kills him in return and takes cover. As the enemy leader orders his people to grab Marshall's keycard, Collins manages to take it first and retreat into the corridor leading into the command center. Just before the blast door shuts, one of the attackers, Michael, pursues her. In the ensuing struggle, Michael's firearm discharges, grazing Baker on the side of the head and knocking him out. Additionally, a tank of sulfuric acid that Michael is carrying is breached. After a long brutal fight, Collins manages to stab Michael in the left eye with the frame of her sidearm. Observing the enemy leader peering through the window of the door, Collins seizes Marshall's keycard and allows it to disintegrate in the sulfuric acid before proceeding into the command center. She inquires of the astonished Shah whether he has already dispatched an SOS. After securing the second blast door, the intercom emits a ping, and Collins responds, only to find herself in conversation with the enemy leader. Collins suggests that if he leaves now, he might escape with his life, while he retorts she might escape with her life if she lets him in. Alexander Kessel reveals that he and his associates are collaborating with the instigators at Fort Greely and the thieves from Tavlinka. He warns Collins that, having already eliminated or subdued everyone else on SBX-1, he is willing to spare her life if she grants him access to the command center to disable it. Collins declines his offer, prompting Kessel to instruct his team to prepare blowtorches to cut through the first door. He reminds Collins that any assistance will be unable to arrive at SBX-1 in time to prevent them from breaching the doors. After inquiring Shaw about the number of janitors, Collins disputes Kessel's assertion that he has already eliminated everyone else on the ship. Kessel, however, discloses that nerve agents dispersed via the ventilation system have incapacitated the SBX-1 crew, necessitating their execution to ensure safety. Kessel adds that if the command center were connected to the same air conditioning system, he and Collins would not be having the conversation. At that moment, a priority call from the White House's Situation Room interrupts. General Dyson questions the whereabouts of Colonel Marshall, to which Collins responds that Marshall is deceased. Collins tells General Dyson that an estimate of about 30 minutes the enemies will need to cut their way through the blast door. Dyson relays that a SEAL team is now inbound to SBX-1. It will take 90 minutes for them to arrive. President Wallace joins Dyson in the Situation Room, and reminds Collins that the only reason the Russian terrorists haven't launched their stolen missiles yet is due to SBX-1 still being under control. Kessel contacts the command center again, revealing he is Captain Welsh captive and threatens to execute him unless Collins opens the doors. Collins refuses to open the door, and so Kessel kills Welsh with a bullet to his head. Collins proclaims that Kessel can kill anyone he wants, but she will not open the door of the command center. Shaw continues to fret, though Collins urges him to calm down, reminding Shaw that they still have a job to do. Shaw confirms that tunnels only the direct way in or out the command center. Suddenly, one of Kessel's henchmen, Zhang, bursts in. Zhang and Collins start fighting hand-to-hand combat. After a long fight, Collins manages to shoot Zhang dead with a shotgun. Collins then confirms that no one else was accompanying Zhang. Collins realizes that the shotgun is useless because using it blows up in your face, leaving her and Shaw without any weapons. They then throw the dead body of Zhang into the ocean. Shortly thereafter, Shaw and Collins verify through the base's cameras that there are no survivors among the SBX-1 personnel. At this moment, Kessel activates the intercom and showcases a provocative image of Collins. She responds by stating that he is not the first to use that against her, emphasizing that despite his extensive planning for various scenarios in his operation, he failed to account for her presence, as she had only been reassigned to SBX-1 the night before. Kessel then reveals that he knows Collins' backstory. 3 years ago, Collins was due to get her dream assignment. However, a 3-star general at the Pentagon offered her a full ride in exchange for sexual favors. While she reported the general for his conduct, Collins' claims were dismissed, and she was put back under the general's command. Fortunately, during a subsequent incident of harassment, she was wearing a wire, which enabled her to have the general discharged. However, this led to Collins facing a barrage of hate mail and death threats from fellow soldiers, ultimately resulting in the public exposure of her photograph. All of this led Collins to attempt suicide by taking pills in a bathtub, though her father arrived in time to save her life. Kessel tells Collins that she is beatable. It has been proven. Kessel tries to convince Collins that they should be working together, and even offers her $30 million in exchange for opening the doors. Kessel will let Collins go to any country she wants where she can live the rest of her life in luxury, though Collins doesn't answer him. Meanwhile, SEAL team is inbounding to SBX-1 with an estimated time of arrival, 67 minutes. Soon, Kessel and his remaining people have finished cutting through the first blast door, and move forward to the second door leading to the command center. At that moment, Baker, having regained consciousness, shoots Collins and Shaw in their bulletproof vests with a concealed handgun before opening the second door for Kessel. As he and his people take over the command center, Kessel reminds Collins that he had given her choices. As Baker and Nikolai zip-tie them to chairs, Shaw calls Baker out as a traitor. Baker claims that America is the traitor for letting immigrants like them to enter the country and take over his job, and that he's decided to look out only for himself after taking $10 million from Kessel for his help. Collins snorts at Baker, blaming everyone else but himself, headbutting him when he gets too close, and Kessel keeps Baker from retaliating, as Kara announces that she has gained control of the emergency broadcast system, which will allow Kessel to transmit messages to the United States. The Situation Room at the White House establishes communication and becomes aware of the takeover and Baker's defection. Following the EBS's control over all smart devices in the United States, Kessel identifies himself as the son of the completely unqualified U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. He outlines the crisis involving the stolen missiles and the seized Interceptor base, indicating that one city will be the initial target before instructing his associates in Tavlinka, Russia, to initiate the launch of the first nuclear weapon. After the missile launches, Kessel reveals that its target is Los Angeles, and that once the missile hits the target, the remaining 15 nuclear weapons will be fired on San Francisco, Seattle, Las Vegas, Cincinnati, Dallas, Denver, Memphis, Chicago, St. Louis, Atlanta, Boston, Philadelphia, Miami, New York and Washington, D.C., causing widespread panic. Kessel takes the camera over to Shah, dismissing that while Shah cares for America, Hindus like him are subjected to enhanced screenings at airports. Though he is invited to share such experiences, Shah instead insults Kessel. In an act of retribution, Baker strikes him with a forceful blow, knocking him out cold. Kessel turns to Collins and reveals her story to the watching Americans, deriding the treatment she had received and praising Collins' integrity, in spite of that and his financial offer of $30 million, while also revealing that the photo was actually for a women's soccer team's charity calendar. In response to Kessel's inquiry about her position, Collins identifies herself as a goalkeeper. She elaborates on the topic by mentioning that a frequent injury in her role is a dislocated thumb. As she dislocates her thumbs, Collins manages to free herself from her bindings. Collins successfully drives both Kessel and Baker back into the corridor, sealing it once again to keep them out, leaving Kara as the sole attacker in the room. The two women engage in a fierce battle, during which Collins successfully launches an interceptor at the missile headed for Los Angeles, destroying it. Although Kara manages to shoot Collins in the arm, Collins ultimately prevails, fatally shooting Kara, killing her. Baker fumes at the situation, reminding Kessel that he had forewarned him about the potential threat posed by Collins and that they should have eliminated her at the first opportunity. Kessel, however, remains composed, confident that this is merely a temporary setback and emphasizes that they have contingency plans in place. As Collins clumsily tends to her arm, she gets a call from the White House. Despite her inability to disable the EBS, Dyson informs her that the SEALs are 50 minutes from their location and that they have accessed Kessel's file. Kessel, who previously served as an intelligence operative in the U.S. Army, initially specialized in Russian intelligence and later worked as a psychological operations and torture expert. His discharge came after he killed 2 prisoners during an enhanced interrogation process. When Shah wakes up, Collins summarizes their current situation for him, freeing him from his restraints before she sits down to take a break. Drifting off to sleep, Collins recalls the morning after her suicide attempt, when her father encouraged her not to let the people threatening her get to her and reminded Collins that he taught her to never stop fighting, just like her mother. Corporal Shah wakes Captain Collins after about 15 minutes to inform her that Kessel wants to talk again. Through the intercom, Kessel confesses to being a monster, shaped by a society that prioritizes wealth over hard work, much like how his father secured his position as an ambassador. Collins brushes off Kessel's claims as mere daddy issues, prompting Kessel to turn the conversation to Collins' father. He then reveals that he has taken her father hostage in his own residence. As Collins begs for her father's safety, Kessel instructs his operative to sever one of Frank's fingers, warning Collins that she can prevent further suffering by allowing him access. When given the chance to speak with her father, Frank urges Collins to continue her fight against oppression. In response, Kessel orders Frank's execution, and a gunshot rings out before the transmission ends, leaving Collins in tears. Enraged by the failure of his plan, Kessel approaches Marshall's lifeless body and utilizes his fingerprint to access the main network of the facility. Shah expresses his confusion over how Kessel anticipated having someone stationed at Frank's, given that the order to reassign Collins to SBX-1 was issued only the night before. Kessel retorts with disdain, explaining that Collins is regarded as a pariah within the Army, and although the decision to reassign her was made 3 days prior, she was only notified at the last possible moment. He then discloses his intention to activate a scuttling protocol that will cause SBX-1 to sink, allowing him to launch the remaining missiles without concern. In response, Collins resolves to descend into the hulls to manually close the ballast valves, hoping to buy them enough time until the SEALs arrive in 25 minutes. Shah, noticing her injuries, offers to take her place and leaps into the sea through the lower external hatch. Observing Shah's departure, Baker moves to confront him while Kessel contacts his Russian associate to ascertain the position of the Russian submarine. Meanwhile, the SEALs are 22 minutes to the SBX-1. Shaw makes his way into the hull and approaches the valve controls, initiating actions to slow the descent. He soon realizes that he is not alone. Collins urges him to flee, but Shaw understands that it is too late. He expresses regret for not being able to assist more and asks Collins to convey his love to his children. Suddenly, Baker descends into the hull, aiming his weapon at Shaw. Shaw attempts to reason with him, asserting that he is not a murderer. Baker concedes, declaring himself a patriot, before fatally shooting Shaw, killing him. Kessel admires Shaw's courage to Collins, admitting that he had dismissed him as a non-threat because of his psychiatric evaluation and so hadn't bothered to put people onto Shaw's family. Collins notices a proximity alert triggered by the advancing Russian submarine, known as the K-83 Danilov. Remembering a phone call Kessel made right after entering the command center, Collins understands that Kessel, after sharing a bank account with his contact, requested that Danny, referring to the Danilov, take action. Collins instructs Kessel to terminate the EBS feed, warning him that failure to do so will result in his Swiss bank account being exposed to the world. Once he complies, Collins discloses her conclusion that Kessel is not a zealot but rather a mercenary, and she begins to cover the glass window on the blast door with duct tape to obstruct his view into the command center. The shaken Kessel tries to claim that it doesn't matter that he is being paid and that the reasons for his actions are still valid, though his slip-up has allowed Collins to realize that Kessel wants to leave alive, and once she has finished taping the window cuts off the intercom to ignore Kessel's threats. Re-establishing communication with the White House, Collins learns from Dyson that the SEALs are just 17 minutes away, but SBX-1 is set to submerge in 15 minutes. This means that once SBX-1 is underwater, the Russian terrorists will initiate their missile launch. Collins devises a plan to allow Kessel to take over the command center, which will trigger the missile launch. However, this will also give Collins the opportunity to reclaim the command center and launch interceptors before SBX-1 sinks. The Situation Room personnel expressed doubt, with a game theory analyst estimating her chances of success at a mere 14%. Undeterred, Collins asserts her confidence, gains President Wallace's approval, and begins her preparations, offering a final taunt to Kessel on the intercom. Kessel contacts Baker via radio to inquire about his proximity to breaching the command center through the lower hatch. Baker informs him that he is nearly there. Upon entering the command center, Kessel finds no trace of Collins and deduces that she must be on the roof, given that the upper hatch is open. After Baker grants access to Kessel and Ivan, Kessel communicates with the Russian terrorist, instructing them to launch all missiles, convinced he has the situation under control as he resumes the EBS broadcast. With the missiles now in flight towards the United States, Kessel commands Baker to pursue and eliminate Collins. Baker finds that Collins is not present on the roof and informs Kessel, who, along with Ivan, begins to search the command center. Meanwhile, Collins, hidden in a hanging hazmat suit, ambushes Ivan, takes his gun, and opens fire on Kessel, forcing him to flee the command center. Unfortunately, the interceptor launch button has been damaged by Kessel's sulfuric acid, which leads Collins to connect a laptop to the launch platform on the roof as an alternative solution. Baker interrupts her just before she can launch the interceptors, resulting in a struggle between them. Collins successfully stuns Baker, wraps razor wire around his neck, and throws him down through the command center's upper and lower hatches. Although Baker drags her down with him, Baker is decapitated by the taut wire mid-fall, while Collins plunges into the ocean. Although fatigued and battered from her challenging journey, Collins successfully makes her way back to the command center and climbs to the roof, where she manages to launch the interceptors just in the nick of time. The 15 missiles are rapidly destroyed, eliciting cheers from the Americans who are watching the live feed on the active EBS, celebrating Collins' triumph. Kessel emerges onto the roof through the hatch, and upon spying Collins asserts that he had brought America to the brink and will do so again. Kessel begins to assault Collins, but she skillfully defends herself, quickly overpowering him and bringing him to his knees. Their confrontation is interrupted by the emergence of the Danilov nearby, leading Kessel to believe he can make his escape. However, the Russian sub-captain steps aside, revealing a sniper position behind him, who takes aim at Kessel instead of Collins. Kessel is caught off guard for a brief moment before he succumbs to his injuries. The sub-captain tips his hat to Collins before reboarding the Danilov, which swiftly departs as helicopters carrying the SEALs arrive over the nearly submerged SBX-1. Later, Collins finds herself recovering in a hospital, surrounded by an array of cards and flowers from appreciative Americans. Shortly after regaining consciousness, she is visited by President Wallace, who informs her that Fort Greely is back in operation and that plans are underway to replace the SBX-1. Wallace praises Collins for her bravery and extends an offer for her to join her national security team, which Collins eagerly accepts. The president then mentions that Collins has another visitor, her father, who was rescued by his fellow Army veterans living in his home after they saw the broadcast, and his severed finger has been successfully reattached. As Wallace departs, Frank presents his daughter with a pet turtle named Turbo, which belonged to Shaw and was salvaged from the wreckage of SBX-1. Collins reflects on Shaw's passing, and Frank encourages her to share stories about him to keep his memory alive, prompting Collins to recount what she knew about her friend, Shaw.